Okay, we'll start with this. An update on the upcoming Super Bantamweight WBC interim title fight between Mexico's own Zulina Muñoz
and Zimbabwe's own Chiwindiri.
The discrepancy in professional experience between the two fighters is noteworthy. Zulina Muñoz, for the most part, is vastly more experienced as a professional boxer than Chuwindiri is. So you get the sense that
she should be able to win this fight. She should be, at minimum, able to win this fight on points, even though she's fighting abroad.
Even though Chuwindiri will be the fighter that has home field advantage, Chuwindiri only has 8 professional fights, a grand total of 8 professional fights in her professional resume, whereas Zulina Muñoz is a veteran.
She's a veteran of 59 professional contests, 59 professional bouts,
sporting a professional record of 53 wins, 4 losses, and 2 draws. She's coming right off that knockout loss to Dina Thorsland.
A few fights before that, she was stopped by her countrywoman, Mayeli Flores.
Kind of get the sense that Zulina Muñoz's 59 professional bouts, her 59 professional contests, and all that experience she's amassed over the years, it is beginning to catch up to her. Though, Chuwindiri, she's not a Mayeli Flores. She's not a Dina Thorsland. She's not a fighter that has that kind of ceiling.
So even if Zulina Muñoz's punch resistance is waning over time, she still is the safe bet to win this fight.
And I am going with Zulina Muñoz to win this fight. At minimum, I think she can win this fight on points abroad in hostile territory in the other girl's home turf. And the whole point of this is to become the WBC's interim champion at 122 pounds, which would make the winner the mandatory challenger for Yamileth Mercado's full title, the WBC title, at 122 pounds. Given when this fight is taking place later on this month, on the 20th, there's room to do the fight between the winner of this fight and the reigning champion, and Jamie Mercado.
Yeah, there's still plenty of time to schedule the fight before this year is out.
This will be Zulina Muñoz's first fight of this year, whereas Jamie Mercado, she's already seen action. Back in April, against Isis Vargas, a pedestrian-level opponent, Jamie Mercado won a decision in that fight. It went the distance against Zulina Muñoz. If she makes it through this,
and I think she can. I think she will.
She finds herself opposite the ring Jamie Mercado. You have to remember that Jamie is a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, the kind of fighter that compromises defense for offense. She's a come-forward brawler.
And a durable one. Remember, she went up there to featherweight and took Amanda Serrano's best shots, took her best punches, and she didn't get stopped.
She's certainly got more upside than Zulina Muñoz, who's 10 years older than Jamie. Zulina's 34, whereas Jamie's 24.
Jamie Mercado has been in some wars, though I'd wager she doesn't have as much wear and tear as Zulina Muñoz.
That's what I think is going to happen. That's how I think it's all going to break down. I think Zulina Muñoz is likely going to beat Chiwandere and find herself opposite the ring, this division's reigning WBC champion, at which point she's under grave threat of being stopped, because Jamie Mercado, for all her drawbacks, she's tough as nails, takes a great shot, and delivers one as well.
She's sharp. She fought 3 times last year,
and she's already fought once this year, so she has no ring rust to cobwebs she needs to shake off, and she's already 10 years younger than Zulina, so you do the math.
I like Zulina Muñoz to win the Chiwindiri fight, and I like Jamie Mercado to beat Zulina Muñoz. That's how I think that cookie's gonna crumble.
And we'll see if that's how it all pans out later on this month on the 20th.
In Zimbabwe, where Zulina Muñoz will attempt to become this division's WBC interim champion.
South of Super Bantamweight at flyweight, Samson Lukowicz posted a tweet that reads, "Waiting on the month of October for a champion or challenger to face Gabriela Fundora, who will step forward to fight her."
Gabriela was in action not but a few days ago as part of a Golden Boy promotion show that was shown on the DAZN platform.
That was last week, and she advanced to a professional record of 8 wins, no losses, and no draws. She was in action against journeywoman opponent Lucia Hernandez Nunez, who has an upside-down record. It's what you would expect to see on any fighter's resume who has less than 10 professional fights, the way that Gabriela Fundora has less than 10 professional fights. Though she exhibits a high ceiling, and she's very young, so she's got plenty of time. I don't know why Samson Lukowicz would be in any hurry to put Gabriela Fundora in there with a champion at either flyweight or super flyweight.
The only titles she should be chasing right now are regional titles and baby belts. She's not ready to take on a full-fledged champion at flyweight.
Doesn't make sense to move her so fast.
Maybe it's just a bit of gamesmanship from Samson Lukowicz, doing what he has to do to promote his fighter. He's always had an eye for talent.
David Benavidez, Sebastian Fundora, Gabriela Fundora, the man clearly knows what he's doing.
And he has to know that at just 8-0, Gabriela's not ready to take on Marlena Esparza or Leonela Paula Judica.
She's not ready to be in there with a hard puncher and a newly crowned unbeaten champion in Argentina's own Gabriela Alanis. At super flyweight, it's the same deal. She's not ready for a Clara Lescurat. She's certainly not ready for a Lourdes Juarez, a Maciela Lujan, or a Tamao Ozawa. These are more experienced fighters, more experienced.
They're a bit too experienced for Gabriela right now, and I think underneath it all, Samson Lukowicz knows that.
Gabriela Fundora debuted as a professional last year, and she managed to get 5 fights in last year. She's already fought 4 times this year. If she returns in October, that will be her 5th professional fight.
Her 5th fight this year.
Let's wait and see who she ends up fighting. In men's super lightweight news, former unified lightweight champion Teofimo Lopez says, "I took over at 135. I'm coming to clean out 140.
It's not exactly true, you know. He didn't clean out 135.
The takeover is back. I took over the lightweight division, and I plan on doing the same at junior welterweight. Pedro Campas is a tough opponent with an aggressive Mexican style, and I can't wait to put on a show for the fans. Every person goes through challenges, but I've put the past behind me, and am thrilled to be back fighting on ESPN in Las Vegas. I am calling this the Take Back, because I am coming to regain what I've lost. One defeat does not define a fighter, and it won't define me. I had been fighting at lightweight since I was a teenager, and it was time to move up. I am going to be an even better, more explosive fighter. You will see that on August 13th.
There's been a lot of talk about Teofimo Lopez's return and how he handled the shock upset loss to George Kambosos.
You know, all the matchroom set him up stuff. He felt that he really won the fight.
In truth, I just think his plan backfired.
I do think that Teofimo Lopez outgrew the lightweight division because he was a young champion, a young fighter, was a young fighter, still is a young fighter whose body's still growing. And if he stayed there as long as he did...
I felt like he was spending way too much time on that George Kambosos situation.
I felt he turned a mountain into a molehill when it came to that George Kambosos Jr. fight. I felt that he should have just done the fight at the price that Top Rank wanted to do it so he could hurry up and get it over with and move on. But they couldn't see eye to eye as far as the money. Things drug out.
It went to a purse bid, and Triller won the rights to the fight.
Then couldn't get it over the line, subsequently defaulted, at which point the rights to the fight ended up going to Matchroom.
And by the time the rights ended up going to Matchroom, a year had passed. It had been a year since Teofimo Lopez's fight with Vasil Lomachenko.
So as stated, I felt that Teofimo Lopez was spending too much time on this thing, and I talked about it several times here on the channel. I raised those concerns ahead of that fight.
I remember leading up to the Lomachenko fight, there were weight concerns for Teofimo Lopez. I remember there being talks about that.
Given the amount of time that he was spending on the George Kambosos fight, it seemed to me that weight would be an issue, could be an issue, that he perhaps overstayed his welcome in the lightweight division, that if he wasn't going to do a rematch with Vasil Lomachenko, worth a lot of money, and he wasn't able to do a Devin Haney fight worth a lot of money, what he ought to do is just move up.
I understand that Teofimo likely wanted to hang on to those belts as long as he could, but when you consider what happened...
And you consider what both Teofimo and his father are now saying, I was right to assume that he was struggling to make weight. I was right to assume that he may have overstayed his welcome in the lightweight division, and in a situation like that, the right thing to have done would have been to vacate the titles right then and there and venture north of 135 pounds to 140, a more hospitable weight for a growing boy, a growing fighter, what could have still been an unbeaten fighter.
I was saying it the whole time. If he's not going to have a rematch with Vasil Lomachenko, that would have been worth more money than the first fight,
and they weren't at liberty to make a Devin Haney fight, what would have been an undisputed lightweight contest, an undisputed lightweight title fight. If they weren't at liberty to do that, then why stick around? Is fighting George Kambosos in defense of your IBF title, is it really that important?
They got greedy. They miscalculated. It happens.
The former champion was quoted as saying, I am only 25 years old. My best years are in front of me. Pedro Campas is the start of a new chapter in my career. I will be a 2-weight world champion very soon. Every contender and champion at junior welterweight better watch out because I am coming to clean out the division.
Exciting times.
It was the perfect storm, is what it was. It was a combination of things. Teofimo Lopez overstaying his welcome in the lightweight division, having some sort of bronchial issue that was affecting him the night before the fight, coupled with George Kambosos being hungry enough and capable enough to capitalize on this opportunity and capitalize off Teofimo Lopez's mistakes. I think Teofimo is a better boxer, a much better boxer than what he showed against George Kambosos. And I actually would have favored Teofimo to win a rematch if there was one.
The same way I would have favored Lomachenko to win a rematch with Teofimo if there was one.
No excuses. I'm not attempting to denigrate Teofimo's victory over Loma any more than I'm attempting to denigrate George's victory over Teofimo. I'm just saying that there were contributing factors to what we saw, and I'm taking those factors into account.
I feel if Loma would have fought Teofimo for a second time, he would have beat him.
I feel if Teofimo would have got the chance to fight George for a second time, he would have beat him, but he's up there at 140 now. He's on the rebound. He's about to take on Pedro Campa in a little over a week's time.
And he's not wrong. His best years still are in front of him, so he needs to make the most of it.
The hope is that underneath the brave face that Teofimo might be putting on, the facade, the bravado, that he will have learned from his mistakes at 135 pounds, and he is now putting his best foot forward. The hope is that underneath it all, he learns something from what happened in that Kambosos situation, and he won't make those same mistakes moving forward. That's what the hope is.
It's a good time to be at 140 pounds. Belts are changing hands. The landscape is changing.
Devin Haney, the lightweight division's undisputed champion. He's going to be taking on George Kambosos Jr. for a second time per reports. And if he beats that guy again, the way I think he's going to beat that guy again, very soon, shortly, he will be joining Teofimo Lopez up there at 140 pounds. And that is a potential super fight that could be worth more money than the Vasyl Lomachenko fight was, because the Vasyl Lomachenko fight happened behind closed doors, without an audience, without a live gate. The fighters didn't make as much money as they could have made had there been a crowd. But now that things are more or less back to normal, a Devin Haney versus Teofimo Lopez fight could get him a bigger purse, a bigger payday than that fight got him.
I mean, there's big fights to be made at or around these weights all around. Maybe Devin Haney stays at lightweight. Maybe he defends those titles against Vasyl Lomachenko.
Maybe he doesn't. Maybe after he fights George for a second time, he vacates them, moves up to 140, at which point Vasyl Lomachenko picks one or some of them up, and he defends them against Shakur Stevenson.
There's good fights to make. There's good fights to make all around.
So even though he lost his belts and he's coming off a loss and he's on the rebound, there's still a lot of opportunities out there for Teofimo Lopez now that he's campaigning as a super lightweight. Not exclusive to a potential Devin Haney fight down the line, there's also Jose Ramirez and the winner of Prograis versus Zapata.
The winner of Taylor versus Catterall, too.
There's fights to be made, there definitely are, and he's in the right place to make them.
All he's got to do is make it past Pedro Campa later on this month.
And I think he can. I think he will. Teofimo Lopez isn't the only fighter, the only former champion that is on the rebound. The first images of Deontay Wilder returning to camp, returning to training for what looks to be a potential fall return, they have been making the rounds, they have been circulating. This image of Deontay Wilder alongside fellow heavyweight, American heavyweight, Michael Hunter. He was very recently seen with former champion Badu Jack, who is now campaigning as a cruiserweight. It seems that Deontay Wilder won't be retiring. He's on the comeback trail. That raises certain questions. Upon his return, who will he fight? Well, a couple of names almost immediately come to mind. The name of Robert Helenius, who battered Adam Kovnowski in his last two fights. Ali Demirezin, who also battered Adam Kovnowski this past weekend. Any one of those two guys, either Robert Helenius or Ali Demirezin, would be ideal for a return fight. Deontay Wilder.
Because don't forget, it's not so much who Deontay Wilder is fighting, but that he's fighting.
That's the selling point at this point. That's the sizzle that Deontay Wilder could be returning. Now, what platform will he be returning in? Well, his last two fights were carried by way of Fox and ESPN, that joint venture, that joint pay-per-view between ESPN and the people over there at Fox.
He hasn't actually boxed on the Showtime platform since the Dominic Breazeale fight in 2019.
The Luis Ortiz rematch, that happened on Fox. The two Tyson Fury fights, the last two, those were joint ventures between Fox and ESPN. Deontay Wilder hasn't boxed on Showtime in some time, and it's possible that his ring return could take place on Fox as opposed to Showtime because Fox is still showing cards sparsely.
Now, most PBC shows seem to be happening on Showtime, but Fox still has that Andy Ruiz versus Luis Ortiz pay-per-view coming up.
Fight fans and pundits alike anticipate that this could be Fox's final year in the sport of boxing, that when their existing contract with the PBC is up, they will make the decision not to renew. But for the time being, they are still putting on 1 or 2 cards at a time, sparsely. Not a comprehensive schedule of fights, but they got 1 or 2 things coming down the pipeline. This might be one of them. Deontay Wilder's ring return might be carried by Fox.
And so long as operational costs are kept low and reasonable, this could be a lucrative endeavor.
Deontay Wilder's ring return could prove to be lucrative. It could do robust pay-per-view numbers, and there could be an actual profit margin so long as operational costs are kept low, because the appeal of it all isn't who Deontay Wilder is fighting so much as that he's fighting.
That he's coming back, that he's not retiring. That's the selling point.
And against the Nordic Nightmare, Robert Helenius, for example, that's a winnable enough fight that Deontay Wilder can get himself back in the winner's bracket in spectacular fashion, because capable fighter that Robert Helenius might be, don't forget he was stopped by Johan Duipa. Ali Dimarezin, who just dished out Adam Kovnowski, his 3rd professional loss. That's another beatable guy, another beatable opponent for Deontay Wilder.
Depending on when exactly he's supposed to return, maybe he gets the winner of Andy Ruiz versus Luis Ortiz.
Yeah, maybe if we're looking at a winter return as opposed to a fall return to action, and if Andy wins the fight as opposed to Luis Ortiz, because nobody wants to see Wilder versus Ortiz 3, but if Andy Ruiz wins that fight, a fight with Wilder would be a battle of the former heavyweight champions, and they could do good business with a fight like that.
Yes, so long as operational costs are kept low and everybody's reasonable.
The situation is somewhat immaterial right now. We don't know if Wilder's coming back on Fox or if he's going to return to the Showtime platform. They certainly could stand to benefit from Deontay Wilder returning to their platform, since they're struggling to get novelty fights like Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. over the line. They still haven't finalized Crawford versus Spence.
And who knows if they will.
Deontay Wilder's ring return and his return to their platform might be beneficial for them. They do seem more committed to boxing than Fox does these days, but you never really know until you know.
Potential opponent options range from Ali Dimarezin to Robert Helenius.
Otto Valine doesn't seem to be doing anything. What about him? What about that guy?
2 or 3 good dance partners out there for Deontay Wilder's ring return.
Let's see who he goes with.